Hi, welcome to Being the Best Version of Yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Carrie Heller. I'm a clinical psychologist based in the Washington, D.C. area. In this podcast, we'll be exploring a variety of ways you can help yourself to make small changes that in turn lead to greater happiness, life satisfaction, and productivity. Obviously, no one has full control over every aspect of their life, as much as some people try to do so. However, by focusing on what we have control over, evaluating areas that could use improvement, and slowly and consciously making those changes, we can become better versions of ourselves. As a psychologist, parent, and person in general, I really value efficiency. Time is a limited resource, and I'd like to make the most of it. Therefore, most of these podcasts will be intentionally short, long enough to give you the basic information and motivation, but without excessive fluff that takes time away that you could use for other things. I hope that you enjoy this podcast. All right. So in terms of figuring out being the best version of yourself, one of the best places to start is thinking about productivity. In part because if you feel like, oh, I can't get stuff done, I'm so disorganized, it's probably pretty hard to feel good about yourself. So if you're someone that has a hard time keeping organized in terms of getting places on time or knowing what you have to do and executing it to get stuff done, then this is probably a good starting point. In terms of the real basics, everyone is different in terms of what works best for them. So we'll definitely give some suggestions, but you kind of have to figure out for yourself, sometimes through trial and error, what works best. On a real basic level, if you think about having to keep track of, places you have to be, appointments, things like that, using some sort of calendar might work really well. There's lots of electronic options in terms of the ones on a phone. If you have an iPhone, Apple Calendar or Google Calendar. Those are probably the two biggest ones. And, you type in the event. It's fairly simple. You can use the fancy features if you want in terms of location, reminders, other things like that. So that's definitely a good starting point, is having a calendar, because then you can visualize your schedule for the day. And beyond places you have to be or meetings, things like that, you could also block out time-specific tasks. So maybe you have an hour set aside for paying bills, another hour for, working on a specific project. But it's kind of a nice way to start structuring things. The other key thing that can be really helpful is to think about a task list. And so with a task list, it basically gives you a nice list of every single thing you have to do. And you can also prioritize it, so you can schedule due dates for different things in order to prioritize it. Some of them have different options where you can drag and click things to create sort of an ordered list. A few programs that make sense if you're going to do it electronically, which have a lot of benefits, would be the Reminders app if you have an Apple device, Todoist, which works on pretty much any electronic device, or Google Tasks, which also works on pretty much any electronic device. So these task list programs are great because you can put everything in that you want. You can create categories. So you can have a list for, daily recurring tasks like taking medicine or brushing your teeth. You could have ones for, weekly recurring tasks. You could have one for civic work tasks, or you have one for shared tasks with a partner, or one for each child. So there's lots of different ways to organize it. So the idea then is thinking systematically based on what you need to get done, figuring out how to organize in a way that works. So for example, if you have a task list and you have, 50 things in it, if there's no organization whatsoever to them, first of all, it's going to be really hard to actually see everything at once because you're going to have to keep scrolling, and it's probably really hard to plan out when you're going to get them done. So that's where breaking it down into categories is helpful, because then maybe on, let's say, a daily recurring task list, you have 5 things, which is a lot easier to visualize and adjust than having 30 things on it. But then by scheduling a day and time for each thing, it then pops it up into a scheduled section of the task list, and so then it creates a nice daily to-do list for you. So in this, using it automatically is really nice because everything's obviously automated, so you don't have to separately look at the list and figure out, what do I need to do today? Because it's all right there for you. Obviously, some people prefer to do it on something like a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and that's perfectly fine. And for a lot of people, that visual works really well. The caveat to that is you have to put more of the structure in yourself, because if it's a whiteboard, unless it's one that has lines in a certain place, you have to sort of set up, essentially the page for yourself. So that's one part. But the other thing is you have to remember to update each day. And if you forget to do something, you're not getting any sort of alert saying, oh, do this. Whereas on an electronic one, it's going to keep popping up if it's overdue until you either mark it off or get it done, and then mark it off. So that's sort of the real basics in terms of using a calendar and a task list. Okay, so now that we've talked about the real basics of a calendar and task list, the next thing that comes to mind is thinking about how do you follow through on using this. So it's great to know these tools, and probably most of you, the idea of hearing about a calendar task list was not anything new. If it was, that's okay too. But the idea, for the hardest thing for most people is to actually follow through on using these tools. So one of the best ways to get acclimated to these items is obviously the more you do it. But to get even started in some way, sometimes putting in stuff that you already remember how to do can be useful. Like, so for example, if you're good at remembering to brush your teeth, put brushing your teeth as a reoccurring task on your task list, because in that case, you're going to get the alert that pops up saying to brush teeth. And if you mark it off after you've done it, in this case, because you already remember how to brush your teeth, you're not using the task list to actually remember to do it, but you're using the task list to practice marking it off as complete. Because then that gets you in the habit of using it. And the more often you use the task list, you're going to get more used to not only putting stuff in, but looking at it besides when the alerts go off. Because you can get into the habit of looking at both your calendar and your task list, let's say first thing in the morning. And for calendar, actually, you can do this for a lot of the task list programs too. You can actually schedule it so as long as you're good at checking email, you can open it up and set it whatever time you want. And maybe first thing in the morning, you get an email that shows all of your tasks for the day and your whole schedule for the day. And then it allows you to kind of visualize it, look at, see if there's anything that just makes no sense, you need to adjust. But then it gets you in the habit from the beginning of the day in terms of thinking about how to structure your time as much as you need to get stuff done. So the idea really, and same thing with calendar events, even if you don't have a whole lot of places to go, which I realize with the pandemic, for some people, you're pretty much home all day working or doing whatever, and may not necessarily have a huge amount of things that necessarily have like a very strict time boundary. But even so, if you block out time for, let's say, I don't know, even lunchtime, if you put from, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. is lunchtime, put that on your calendar, because then you get in the habit of structuring your day even with events that no one's really holding you to, and it gets you in the habit of using it. And then if you make plans with someone, put it on the calendar, maybe send them an invitation, and then that pops up on their calendar. But then the idea is the more you use that, and even some of the features, whether it's as a traffic thing on a lot of them where you can say, remind me such time to leave in time, that the more you use those things, the more you're going to get used to the idea of the calendar and continue to kind of keep using it. So I hope this is helpful in thinking a little bit more about how to start using a calendar and a task list. Okay, one other thing that's important to think about with the idea of productivity is, being happy with how much you're getting done. Because if you make a plan that's not realistic at all, you're going to be dissatisfied, or you may feel like, I'm never going to get this done, so why do I even try making a plan? I mean, honestly, for a lot of people that don't like planning or really averse to it, a lot of times it comes down to the fact that they have a hard time doing it accurately and that the plans don't work. I mean, with planning, no matter how good you are at estimating completion times or planning, things are going to come up from time to time. Sometimes those things that come up are pretty frequent. Sometimes it's pretty infrequent. But even so, you have to have some flexibility to plan. You can't make a plan down to the minute and expect every single thing to always work perfectly. And so I think having a realistic mindset with planning is another big piece to the idea of productivity and using a calendar and task lists. There's obviously more to it than what we've talked about so far, but I don't want to sort of throw too much out there to start, because I think that's going to make it a lot harder to be able to make changes and implement stuff. So I think just start with a few basics of a calendar, a task list, and just thinking about being as realistic as you can in putting stuff in. Or maybe start small. Maybe you try structuring parts of the day with the task list in the calendar and then do the rest of the day the way you normally would, if that's more comfortable. I think you have to figure out for yourself where the balance is between being productive as a means towards increasing sort of your happiness and satisfaction with things versus becoming sort of more stressed by it. Because in a lot of cases, if you feel overwhelmed by things, and in another episode we'll talk in more depth about that sometimes the act of planning in itself can actually reduce feelings of anxiety or just being overwhelmed. So something to kind of leave you with for the next time. All right, so I hope that you've enjoyed this first podcast episode of being the best version of yourself. So as kind of a summary, in this episode, we talked about a couple of key ways to help yourself to be more productive in terms of keeping organized with a calendar or task list. In future episodes, we'll talk a little bit more about planning, how to help reducing feeling overwhelmed by things or stressed, managing anxiety, and lots of other things that are really important towards helping you to be the best version of yourself. Until next time, I'm Dr. Kerry Heller.